Hello, my name is Alex Lumley, and I'm one of the founders of Savvy DeFi, along with those gentlemen in the purple hoodies over there. And today we're going to talk about the contributor's dilemma, subtitled "DAO Life is Hard." And I have a great group of gentlemen here with me. One is missing because the DAO life is so hard, but we have Sobi, T-Norm, Joe, and Immutable Lawyer. And then Dan Peng is joining us in a moment. But to get started, why don't you guys introduce yourself, and we will start with Sir Sobi.
Hi, I'm Sobi. I'm a core contributor at Zai and also an Arbitrum delegate.
I'm T-Norm. I am on the partnerships team at Boost Studios and also a DAO contributor.
Yep, I'm Joe, Disruption Joe on Twitter, and I am a contributor for Arbitrum and head of growth for Thrive Protocol.
I'm the other Joe, but I go by Immutable Lawyer, the boring name. I'm a core contributor at the YDX and now Arbitrum, you could say. And I'm the founder of Access Advisory, like a legal, regulatory, and DAO advisory firm.
So just to keep things lively, if somebody has a question while we're talking, just go ahead and raise your hand or shout out, and we're happy to pass you the microphone. But as I said before, this is a lot around how DAO life is hard and the contributor's dilemma. What we've heard a lot of people talking about in here is that there's a lot of opportunity. People see like a $4 billion treasury or whatever it is, and they go, oh, I want some of that money. Or people see like, oh, LTIP or STIP or a gaming catalyst program, they say, oh, I want some of that. The opportunity is there. And then people come in and they go, wow, people are so nice. People are so great. Like Arbitrum isn't like those other places. Like people are actually nice, even if you couldn't tell that from Twitter and Telegram, but they are nice. Now, the complexity is that everything is really difficult. Not everything, but a lot of things are really difficult. So what we want to talk about today is like how you all got into the DAO, why you're into the DAO, and what the opportunity is. Sobi, do you want to start with you?
Yeah, I got into the DAO after AIP 1.1 drama or one drama. I thought it was really interesting that a bunch of people were really fucking mad that the foundation wanted to like set itself up, but no one gave a shit that they gave people tokens. So that was really confusing for me. It seemed like there was a huge like character assassination thing happening where people were like, oh, fucking the foundation wants to dump tokens on everybody. And even people I respected were like, oh, you did a market maker thing, you should buy back those tokens, which is like one of the dumbest fucking things I've ever heard in my life. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna get involved in this. And I've had a pretty steadfast opinion that the DAO like shoots itself in the foot a lot. Like I'm actually a huge advocate for just giving the whole treasury back to the foundation. I'm half joking about that though. The thing that kind of drove me towards it, and like I'm like known amongst delegates for being kind of brash about stuff, but I think the the most awesome thing though about the Arbitrum DAO, and ultimately why I like contributing to it, is like even this room full of people, everyone's from different walks of lives. People are probably working on different things in different verticals, and we all give a shit. Like it's really hard to find people that care, especially care about like decentralized software, which is like a very nerdy niche thing. Sometimes we have weekly governance calls, and I have them like literally every time I'm on a governance call, I have to I just get up and pace in my room because I just put the whole thing in like a gallery view, and I'm like, there's 42 people on here across different time zones, all trying to contribute to this. And I think it's really hard to find first of all, it's hard to find people that just care about things in general, but it's really hard to find people in crypto that really care, are good actors, and want to do things the right way. And I think that is a unique thing that the Arbitrum DAO has over other people, which is why I love contributing to it, even though I'm kind of grumpy sometimes.
And so just to dive in a little bit there, because we got some time. So first of all, if you guys don't know this and can't imagine it, Sobi is one of the best follows on Twitter. Highly recommend. Not everything is PC nor kosher, but it's all real. So highly recommend. And great NBA content, I will say. So just diving back in, Sobi, for you, you always come in, you always speak your mind, but you've kind of come back in a lot more around the gaming catalyst program. How has that gone about? What have you been doing with it? How have you been helping with it? And I guess maybe let's start with, first, what is the gaming catalyst program?
So the Gaming Catalyst program is basically, it kind of says it in the name, it's a program to promote gaming. Honestly, Dan's not here right now, but Dan's been a massive, massive help to that. For people that don't know, I'm a core contributor at Zai. It's like the L3 for gaming and the Arbitrum ecosystem. We're like crushing it across all metrics, over like 600,000 wallets, 2 million transactions a day, blah, 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 blah. And we took a very high conviction bet on building on Arbitrum, even though we got offered like a lot more money from other places, stuff like that. I just think the Orbit tech stack is the best and allows us to create the best experience for people. And I do think that gaming is going to be, otherwise I want to be fucking doing this for like 4 years of my life. I think gaming is going to be one of the biggest things in crypto. I think Arbitrum has done an amazing job of creating a sticky DeFi ecosystem. Like the proof is in the pudding. There's more ETH on Arb than like every other chain combined. So that's been really cool to see. But I think what we want to do is help lead the charge on the gaming thing. And one thing I've realized from just working on this catalyst is like, it is actually hard to get people aligned on things. And that I think is interesting because everyone has different perspectives, and it doesn't mean someone's perspective is wrong. They're just viewing things in a different way. So for us, like, we're aggressively, if you will, trying to be Arb aligned. Today we were talking about, hey, we were doing some education around game publishing, how that works, right? So in traditional gaming, game publishers, provide you a minimum guarantee, they get a rev share, and they don't really take equity, but there's a rev share component. In crypto, thanks to like Polygon and Avalanche for fucking spending bajillions of dollars and not seeing anything for it, there's this expectation of free money without getting anything out of it. I think we should move away from that, from this gaming program, because it's like industry standard. And that was an interesting conversation today about like, one, educating people about that, because all the people on the panel, like, I really respect, they're all really smart people doing awesome shit. And sometimes I forget, like, oh, you actually may not know that much about this one thing that I've like been spending the last 4 years of my life doing. So it's always cool to have that interdisciplinary conversation with people and help educate across like the knowledge gaps. But then the other thing is, how do we make something that's fair? Like, for me, it's very important that at Zai we have a reputation of being like Arbitrum aligned and ultimately just doing what's best for game developers. I was like one of the first people to speak up and be like, oh no, we need to do something that isn't just publisher focused. Like, we need to do something for like the games on Arb that aren't publishers. So like Proof of Play, that's Pirate Nations, or like AI Arena, right? Because right now most of the conversation has been centered around Zai and Treasure. And like, maybe it's not in my self-interest to bring up other people, but like the stakeholders in this ecosystem matter. And that's just been an interesting kind of experience in general of like, how do we build something that's collaborative? Because at the end of the day, it's hard to find like the game theory optimized aspect of this, right? It's like, you want to do what's best for you, but you also want to do what's best for Arbitrum. Because the way I view it is like, everything that's good for Zai is good for Arb, but not everything that's good for Arb is directly good for Zai. But if the Arbitrum tech stack in general has this reputation of like being the best for gaming, it actually makes my job a lot easier. So we'll might have to like make some short-term sacrifices here or relinquish some control here. It's ultimately what's best for like long-term sustainability. And that's just been a really interesting exercise to like go through something that, the whole industry kind of agrees is a big use case. But then hearing like, one comment was like, why shouldn't Arbitrum just focus on DeFi? And I think it was Dan or Alex or one of these guys were like, well, does the App Store only focus on like fintech apps? I was like, oh, that's a pretty good rebuttal to that. So it's been cool.
At the end of the day, it's about building like a vibrant economy, a vibrant Arbitrum economy. And I think it is interesting how having a lot of these conversations eventually build on each other. Because if I think back to it, Sobi, what was it like in October of last year, or maybe September, where you just wrote like a quick forum post saying, when gaming catalyst, right? And now here we are 5 months later, it's like, it's getting real. But like, people are in a room talking about it, it's pushing forward. But at the end of the day, it is like, someone said today that if this catalyst program goes forward, which would be like something maybe like 200 million USD, that would be like the 10th largest fund for gaming in the world, which is awesome. So anyways, we'll get back to gaming more when Dan gets here. But now from gaming to STIP, T-Norm, you were one of the like originators of STIP and pushing it forward, and maybe I would call you one of the first sacrificial lambs of the DAO. So what has your journey been like to get to the DAO, and how did you get there?
Yeah, I've been involved in the forum since the beginning. I think partially due to my last job. When the DAO was formed, I was at Arbitrum GovHack, so it was my job to kind of be a forum rat to begin with. Arbitrum was one of the sewers that I ran around in the forums. It was a really quiet place in the beginning. I think where we're at now is quite a bit different, a lot different. STIP kind of came about as I left that role and started to see, more of the fragile dynamics of the early DAO taking place. There was a lot of tension about unlocking funds. Delegates were hesitant to fund specific proposals. We had a Camelot proposal that came in, and so kind of saw an opportunity to help broker, for lack of a better word, that deal to design a proposal that kind of bridged the gap between the delegates, the protocols, and put together something that could unlock capital for the ecosystem.
And if we think about kind of the history of the DAO, it was like in March when it started, or the airdrop and all AIP 1.1 that Sobi was talking about. We pushed forward. There wasn't a ton of stuff happening, and then all of a sudden, Camelot comes through with this proposal called Accelerating Arbitrum, which generated a lot of interest, generated a lot of heat. It didn't go through, but that got into STIP, which is the one that T-Norm was talking about, which was around September. That was an accelerant for the DAO. A lot of people came in. It was super interesting. It was also a shit show, and that's also why I call T-Norm a sacrificial lamb, but we learned a lot from that. After that, we had the back fund, which was kind of instigated by Vela, Savvy, Ramsey's Gains. And after that, it was like ARDC, the procurement committee, and now we've got into gaming and a bunch of other things. But you can kind of see how about maybe once a month, we're kind of putting a proposal together. And earlier on, after 1.1, we had the Priority Labs proposal. So we're kind of averaging about maybe 1 to 2 grants a month. But I will say that I think we're getting faster. We're picking up new people. We're learning a lot more, and our conversations are moving a lot faster. And so now, a large part of all that, one of the largest facilitators is Disruption Joe. Joe, you want to tell us a little bit about your story of how you got into the DAO?
Yeah,
We love Joe.
oh, thank you.
We love Joe, yeah.
I thought you were like, Joe. Anyway, he's a big fan of frameworks, and I'm not really a framework guy. We just put in the name of our proposal. So a lot of weirdness here. I came into Arbitrum because I have a mental disability where I can only focus on like one thing super intensely. And for 3 years before that, it was Gitcoin. And at Gitcoin, when I joined up, I started working on the operations. We launched out the DAO, and I went to this fraud detection work stream. So it was one of the first work streams. I hired the first person there to figure out how treasuries work in DAO and all these things, and saw all the complications of a DAO starting. And when you go through that, and you have all these ideas bouncing off each other, and you end up taking a path, and maybe you don't agree with that path, right? Most of the time, if anybody's in a relationship or has at least one friend, you know that like making decisions with other people doesn't always go exactly down the path you want, right? And sometimes you're like, had we not had that extra drink, I would not have fallen down the stairs, or like whatever the situation might be, right? You're like, I had a better idea than you, right? And there's sometimes where it's like, I don't know, maybe there's a trade-off scenario, and there's other times you're like, no, this was pretty obvious. Like, we were going to run into this trouble with this decision, right? And so as you watch DAOs super early, we saw these same patterns start to play out over and over. Like, they either started out at, like, total stasis, take Uniswap, took them a year to pass anything. Or they'd start out in, like, let's not be Uniswap, so they just start spending millions of dollars on everything without giving any care to what they're funding. And whichever way they go, they swing the pendulum way too hard back the other direction, and they either centralize or not. So I really saw what Arbitrum was doing as an opportunity as I was ready to leave Gitcoin. And Gitcoin, they launched a protocol out, which meant that the civil defense work and grant review fraud detection work was no longer something that was like a public good for the community. It should be charged. And I was going to start a company actually doing those services. And, they're building a protocol, and on top of that protocol is an application, and there's people who need to do service for it. And I said, well, if you guys are going to start charging a fee, I'm not going to compete directly against Gitcoin on servicing Gitcoin. And they're like, you're crazy. Nobody would ever not start a business just because we're competing against them. And so then I found Arbitrum and started a company called Plurality Labs, where we could go to an opportunity where the ethos was well aligned. And what I mean by that was they launched the DAO with all of the sequencer fee revenue going to the DAO, right? And wasn't anybody else really confused as DAO after DAO, like the Uniswap thing? It's like, oh yeah, the company keeps all the funds, but we're a decentralized organization making money for them. It just didn't make sense to me. I'm sure there's great ideas behind it, but to me, it was like really goofy. So I really wanted to solve that thing. And the other thing we had found was that reviewing grants at scale is it's both difficult and really interesting problem to solve. And I think we should have way more centralization in our decision making. We should, when we're ready to give out funds, we should have a pool of funds available, find the person with the best possible context, like who are we all gonna bet on is the best person at making that decision. And maybe there's 2 other people who also have contacts who can keep them in check or something, and let them go nuts, do the right thing. And then what do we decentralize? It's the accountability on the other side, right? The whole community should review, because that's where corruption, that's where collusion happens, right? And that's where we want to solve the problem. So solving that problem is like my core passion, and it couldn't be done in a system that isn't actually set up to be decentralized. Because as soon as a person who wants to solve something like the problem I'm going after comes into an ecosystem like that, well, the person who's trying to corrupt or collude the system is probably going to change the outcome, right? So that's why I'm here for Arbitrum. I really believe in it.
And one point for context, that the foundation in Arbitrum has a lot less control and is a lot less centralized than in other places. So there's so basically the foundation has a lot less kind of control over the DAO than in other places. There's a famous story of an important foundation member on the very first community call. He was asked by a very large delegate, okay, so what are we gonna do now? Like, what's the vision? And the foundation person responded, I don't know, you tell me. And there was like a look of disbelief on this large delegate's mind, because like, oh shit, now we got to figure it out. And the past year and a lot of today has been us trying to figure this all out. And I'm not going to say like we figured it out, but we're not as lost as we were, I would argue. And a large part of that is actually because of an immutable lawyer who, Dan, in case you didn't know, immutable lawyer is actually a lawyer. And his name is Joe. And Joe, you got into the DAO because of STIP and the ARDC. Can you tell us what the hell the ARDC is and your kind of story?
I don't know what your shit did. Yeah, so I'll give a bit of background of how I got into DAOs in the first place. So, like, I have primarily a background in legal and regulatory DeFi advisory, right? And I used to have clients approaching me saying, we want to set up a company, offer this product, and set up a DAO. And I would be like, what does he mean, set up a DAO? He was like, yeah, I want to set up a DAO, and what he would mean would be set up a foundation that would be used as the smokes and mirrors for a DAO. So I wanted to understand what the hell a DAO is, basically. That's where it started from. And you segregate the prongs, and initially they would be like, we want to set up a DAO, and the DAO would be a Discord channel, a community mod, and 3 people hunting for an airdrop. So that would be a DAO initially, which is obviously not a DAO. And then you sort of started getting into governance, sort of, because governance facilitates the North Star, which is a DAO. And I started contributing to IDX, I think now 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Primarily, the initial intention was I really like their trust structure. It's the legal nerd in me. So I started contributing to governance there, mainly in relation, sort of offering my legal sort of knowledge. I wouldn't call it expertise at that point in time, but my legal knowledge in relation to how it intertwines with governance, so to speak. And yeah, recently I got into Arbitrum. I think it's 5 months ago now, and I think my contributions would be mainly cross-reference to the prongs of what we call a DAO, right? Because so a decentralized autonomous organization, we're pretty autonomous, I would say, almost fully autonomous, and that comes with its inefficiencies, of course. Pretty decentralized, I would say, but we're fucking disorganized, like very, very disorganized. So my contributions to date in Arbitrum have all sort of focused on the organization prong of what we call a DAO, right? And that started initially with 2 proposals in tandem, which I credit initially Matt from Blockworks for the idea of the ARDC and DK from Premia for the idea of the procurement sort of framework and procurement committee. But they both focus on organization, and I'll explain sort of in what sense. So yeah, so basically there was a huge uptick in proposals in the Arbitrum governance forums, and it's very difficult to have a know-how on sort of the overall either infrastructure of a proposal, the knowledge that you need to understand it, the knowledge that you need to dilute it. So basically Blockworks had initially proposed the setting up of a coalition that would undertake, the research of proposals, objectively reporting on them, where there is an on-chain implementation, a security auditor that would be elected or rather chosen to actually audit that particular code that would be implemented. So it was a very good idea. And it didn't pass because there was a sort of element of rather self-appointment. So we self-appointed ourselves to basically do this job. So we basically are huge advocates that if an idea is good, it didn't pass, like implement feedback, optimize, and resubmit. And I was actually trying to get Matt to resubmit. I saw that he was a bit hesitant, and I just did it myself, basically instructed my team. And we started working on optimizing the coalition proposal and created the Arbitrum Research and Development Collective, which included a sort of a tendering process for the selection of the members, legally binding checks and balances, that is, the legal nerd, boring stuff that no one reads, but it's necessary, and a lot of basically structural implementations on appointment, even, how to remove a member, under what criteria a member can be removed by the DAO advocate, and all this stuff. So that was the Arbitrum Research and Development Collective, which elections will start very soon. Application submissions are done. We have a couple of applicants here actually, which is very good to see. There's Omer from Chaos who applied for the risk role, and Matt from Blockworks who applied for the research role, and there are also a couple of security auditors. What we did like to see is that the structural optimization of the ARDC actually even attracted service providers that didn't want to contribute to DAOs due to their disorganized nature. So one comment that I got from one particular applicant was that they were only applying because it was structurally sound, because it was very organized. This particular endeavor, not the DAO, because we're still disorganized, but this particular endeavor was very organized, very structured well. So they wanted to apply, and they applied for that. So that is the ARDC, I'd say.
Thank you so much, Joe. Man, my Maltese friend over here has 3 loves: whiskey, horses, and legalese, I would say.
Yeah, you could say that.
And now we have my friend Dan Pang over here. Dan, your story, I think, kind of begins a lot with STIP Back Fund, right? We spent a lot of late nights working on that together, along with Gaines and Ramsey's. But what's your overall journey in terms of how you got into the DAO and how you got in further into the gaming development program to work with Sobi and Lakes of Treasure, et cetera?
Man, so the back fund did kick off a lot of my involvement. Honestly, I did not intend to get involved that much just because I'm not very bullish on most DAOs, and I've seen all the shit that happens when you try to dip your toes. It's like, that does not feel good. And I honestly thought that was going to be the same story for Arbitrum. But when the back fund started, thanks to T-Norm and a few other folks, I realized as we started working through the process and through the back fund about how chaotic the process was, but not because there's, like with a usual DAO, you might see a foundation super involved or some controlling entity. It was because it was pretty decentralized. And working with Alex, working with a lot of folks here in the panel and in the audience, started to think about, how we drive philosophically towards what I think could actually be a DAO that survives and builds and thrives for the next years. And then, of course, like personally and for Bell Exchange, like how do we get involved in so we can build the network into a place that we want to build in, right? So got involved with this back fund, started thinking about where else I can apply, my time. LTIPP helped kicked off that process, and then, Alex and Matt and the rest of the folks did a great job bringing that over the line. And then, thought about what areas of that we're still trying to push on that needed help. And I think that's a key thing, right? Like if you're trying to contribute, like there's always something that needs help, and you can probably find it by asking just folks here, where you can help push something forward. And gaming had a huge gap, right? Lots of talented builders, not a lot of enthusiasm to write a proposal and push it through the DAO. And so I'm like, screw it. I'm a masochist. I like writing, and if I can apply my talents to something that can,
bring a ton of net users into the ecosystem. I think that's a huge win for, gamers, but also, the DeFi ecosystem. So that's just my story, and I think there's a ton of opportunity.
So we're gonna try to speed it up a little bit, and we'll maybe do a couple of like flash rounds on questions, and anybody can take the mic. We won't go around the horn. To you, what is your least favorite thing about the DAO? Like the small thing that just pisses you off, and you're like, God, if we could fix this thing, it wouldn't solve everything, but it would just make me be way less mad. Anybody?
I'll take it quick. So I was talking about being a masochist. I think one of the pain points is, and I think it's a symptom of like crypto being anon, but also just because in general people like throwing rocks but not like doing the work right. And so like taking the time to like hear out a problem statement, building out the proposal, and then you throw it out there like, give me constructive feedback. And then you get feedback, but not the constructive part. It's like, this sucks. You're just trying to like get money. You're just trying to, it's like, okay, well, like let's improve it together. And that dialogue has, traditionally hasn't been super great, but I think there's a lot of mechanisms we're introducing through governance to make it a lot more useful and like constructive. So.
Yeah, I think one of the pain points I have at this point in time is the lack of mechanisms for us to iterate on proposals that have passed. So you have a proposal with an endeavor for a 6-month time period, but you do not have the governance mechanisms in place to be able to iterate on that proposal in a more time efficient manner without spending a month to pass any optimizations to that structure. So I think that's my main pain point at this point in time.
I'll tell you, my biggest pain point is like how information is everywhere, and the amount of Telegram groups I'm in.
Dude, yeah, that was my.
It's like our team moved to Slack because there was like way too many Telegram groups for anybody to do anything productive on our team. So if we could just figure out the communication, it'd be so much better. Sobi, we're gonna say the same thing.
I was gonna do there's almost as many Telegram chats as there are protocols on fucking Arbitrum right now, dude. That's really annoying to keep up with. And then I think this is a good feedback I realized from being a delegate for the STIP. I don't really understand people's expectations, and what I mean by that is like I have like a Twitter presence or whatever. Protocols will reach out to me on Twitter, like I'll hop on a call with them, review their proposal, and I'll be like, I don't like this part, give them feedback. But then other people were like, why aren't you posting it to the forum? So I was just hella confused. I was like, do I like talk to people on the phone, and then am I supposed to like write it down and then post it again? It's not very clear what you're expected. And by the way, none of us are fucking getting paid, and I have hell other shit to do. So yeah, that's probably my main pain point.
Yeah. Go ahead, Norm.
Yeah, I think you touched on a good point, which is
getting paid.
Yeah. Honestly, no, I think the biggest pain point is there's a lot of really obvious fixes that need to be made, and no one is incentivized to do it. Instead, everyone is incentivized to push proposals that benefit them. So that's the nature of the DAO, honestly. That's how it works. Like, that's how these systems are designed to work. But there's a clear need for some really easy proposals with big unlocks that we've talked about all day, talked about kind of all week. And there's no kind of mechanism to push those forward, and that's hurting everyone.
Those are great ideas, Norm. Are you going to write those proposals?
Unless you pay me.
Well, that's my pain point is we did pay people to write proposals. We didn't pay T-Norm, but he got some from the foundation. It wasn't enough for the great work that he did. But we didn't want to look like we were double dipping, because that would have been really, really bad. So we judiciously decided not to. We gave a fire starter for the ARDC, the STEP, most of the proposals that came out, and then we put a proposal out saying, hey, just as more like a startup, we think we showed enough value. And people said, all those things that happened because of you were not your value. You didn't do that. And I was like, no shit. We identified the blocker and took care of that. That's how you get shit done. And so, we have a new situation now with like a different level of constraints and oversight, where instead of us being able to identify those blockers and go fix them, we have a different constraint and an oversight system for it, which is both good and bad, right? Like, I hope that somebody hearing this that might be in that, group that's overseeing this is a champion of the good things that we can do when we can move fast, right? And I'm not complaining that there shouldn't be any oversight. I'm saying that I wanted to keep us moving, and that was like really keeping things moving. I'm hoping we can find ways to legitimize that role of people who can give a little bit of funds to start fires, and put more people in that position that we can trust. Give them a shot. If they screw up with like 100K, it's okay. That's what experimentation is. Like, you're not going to bat 1,000 on experimentation.
First world problems, I tell you right there. First chain problems. Well, all right, so now I gotta...
wait. There's one more thing. Also, we can't get Sobe a goddamn monitor.
Yo, Sobe needs a monitor.
That's a...
All right, so now we're going to go at 30 seconds. I got to time you guys because you guys can talk a lot, and I can talk a lot. So, all right, we're going to 30 seconds. If somebody asked you, if a new contributor to the DAO asked you if they should join the DAO, either as a delegate or a contributor or a service provider or writing a proposal, if somebody asked you if they should join, what would you tell them? Sobe?
I mean, honestly, I would tell them no. It's find someone that you can work in the DAO to help you. Like, honestly, like Joe, Joseph, all these guys have been tremendous helps. Like Dan, like without Dan, this fucking gaming thing doesn't get done. He doesn't even do a gaming protocol. Like, the thing that we need to figure out, I think, about scaling this stuff is like, how can the protocols and the founders that make Arbitrum successful focus on what they want to do, but then work with people that are contributors to help them, go through the whole process. We're like one of the most successful projects on Arbitrum right now, and I don't even know how to get a grant. So that like probably needs to be fixed, dude.
So Sobe, like, the delegates now are going to get paid 6,000 USDC or something like that for this experimental design. Are you guys going to hire a governance person?
So we were talking about this earlier. I think it's really hard to find governance people. Like, a lot of the governance people are like early ETH chads that like don't have a home and are just like digital nomads. They're just like doing shit, or they're people like Joe or T-Norm or Joseph that will like go out and spin up their own thing. I do think that it makes sense over time. I feel like if you have like a fractional governance person, it could be helpful. But it should be like founder driven at the same time. Like, I'm reviewing stuff. It would be nice if we could just figure out a better way to like disseminate information. Like, again, we have like literally 700 Telegram chats. There's the forum. There's these calls. It's like really confusing. And there's all these AI tools we should probably be using to minimize this stuff. But I think it's an experiment, man. Like, I can complain about it all day, but at the end of the day, like, Arbitrum is literally like a bunch of DAOs. In my opinion, DAO stands for dudes arguing online, and we just have like a $7 billion treasury to govern over, and that's like a crazy fucking experiment.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, so we'll see how it goes.
And T-Norm, there's a lot of money, $7 million. And if you wanted to get a grant right now, or you wanted to get paid for doing some work, where would you go to?
I think if you want to be useful,
Yeah.
you should be unemployed and you should fix problems. And I think there's a lot of very obvious problems, and no one wants to do them because they all want to raid the treasury, and that's a natural instinct. This is like the same thing you're going to get from me every time.
Yeah.
If you want to get a reputation in the DAO, get in the forum and bring good arguments backed by data and get a reputation over 2 to 3 months. Find a problem that people can't get out of their own way to solve because they want money for themselves, and create a solution that can convince delegates that you're credibly neutral, and then ask for way more ARB than any of us have. That would be my roadmap.
So someone made this joke. I think at the end of the day, like, we're all going to be real about this stuff because, like, we all feel like we can fix some of these problems because some of them are obvious. But someone made the joke the other day that joining the Arbitrum DAO was like joining a gang, where you have to like cut off a limb or do like 2 or 3 months of work. Gangs are more efficient. That's very true. You have to do like 2 or 3 months of work and like add a lot of value, then go and solve a problem, and then hope you get paid. And that's not great. I think we want to solve that in many ways. But Joe, what were you gonna say?
This is decentralization. Like, there's nobody to fire us because we're talking shit, right? Like, that's what happens. It's a really cool thing, right? It took a while to align on like some of these things, but like here's the example of why it's difficult in the DAO. So if you understand this, you'll get it, and you'll see some opportunities. Did anybody travel more than 10 hours to get here? Yeah? There's only a few of you guys, right? Like, how much did it cost to get here? $1,000? Yeah, 2. Okay, so let's say it's 2 per person. There were 10 of them. I'm gonna put up a proposal. That's a great commitment. First, we're all aligned. That's a huge commitment to be here for these fucking days, right? Does anybody disagree with that that's a good commitment, right? Okay, so we're all aligned, right? $20,000. Tell me what percentage that is of $7 billion. Okay, could we put up a proposal right now? The second that proposal hits the forum, there's going to be a bunch of people like, I traveled 9.5 hours. What about me? Right? And then we need, I'm not saying that word. So that's what happens. But one of the things we don't think about is there's like a thing in Japan they do is zoning, where they say, instead of saying, here's all the things you can't do, they say, do whatever the hell you want as long as we haven't said you specifically can't do that, right? And it's this push forward mentality. You might have heard some of this, sociocracy has methods like this, but like in that situation, couldn't we just approve the proposal and then do another proposal for 9.5 hours and then another for the next? That's why DAO life's hard.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would say, so to answer your question on whether I would recommend, I would say yes. So for example, for myself, when I spent 4 years at a crypto-focused, 3 or 4 years at a crypto-focused consulting firm, and then when it came to start my own thing, my go-to-market strategy was, I know my shit, I know I'm smart, I mean, I am.
Modest also, I think.
Yeah, but how do I prove to people that I am? So my go-to-market strategy was through governance contribution. It's a good place, especially in Arbitrum, where it's very autonomous, that you're able to prove that you know your shit. People will call you out if you don't, rest assured. You'll have 20 people calling you out if you don't. And that is when I started, for example, I think, during the STIP, helping Trader Joe out with the STIP assessment, and then, commenting on the forums, and people would, reply to my comments, like my comments, reach out on Telegram to discuss my comments, and then, you start contributing, building that brand equity. So even from a selfish perspective, the brand equity you get and the network you get and the knowledge you accrue by virtue of contributing to a DAO by far is disproportional to the headaches you get from replying to 15 Telegram chats, although it's very inefficient nonetheless. But yeah, I would always recommend someone to contribute, I guess.
There was a person who asked me as they were getting into the DAO, what is the Immutable Lawyer's deal? Like, who does he know? How did he get into the DAO so quickly? And I go, two things. One, it's decentralized, so there's lots of opportunity. And two, he's fucking good. Oh, okay. He's really good. So that's how you can get into the DAO, but you still have to cut off an arm.
Yeah. And by the way, credit to Alex, because he was a huge facilitator of getting me sort of, exposed to DK, for example, who then, had a conversation on procurement with him. And all of a sudden I'm working on the procurement committee. So you will find people who will, grab you by the arm and tell you, listen, talk to this guy. I think you'll be able to help him on a proposal he's working on. Talk to another guy. Alex was a huge part in that, and so was DK.
Yeah. I heard a quick question about that point. Did that happen in person or online?
No, completely online. Like I saw DK's face today or on a couple of calls, but usually has a purple avatar. So I had no idea who he is.
One note I will say, great job, DK, great job. One note I will say about that is that all of that is purely selfish, right? Like grabbing a Immutable Lawyer and introducing it to people is because we need help. And like the DAO has a talent constraint problem and a funds problem. So we all are like trying to help each other, and when we find talented people, we try to push them forward and give them opportunities.
Yeah, I think everybody made good points. Immutable, your point about needing to build yourself like a rep, like obviously it's like with decentralization, there's like a very heavy like requirement to build trust, especially if you're like anon and like you don't have a background you want to share, right? T-Norm's part about like proving yourself by going to the forum, going to like a public place and like sharing your thoughts like methodically, super smart. Sobi, I think your point on finding helpers, right? Like going in, like day one, jumping in is kind of scary. You're like, I don't know what people are going to say about me. Like, how am I going to be judged on my points I'm making? Like, there's so many helpers, probably a lot better than like day one of like STIP, right? Like STIP is like, oh crap, I don't even know what to do. So, I think the benefit if you're looking to get involved is it's going to be a little bit easier, and it's going to continue getting easier. There's a lot of like processes being developed. I think Christoph from L2 Beats is making a onboarding guide and like a place where you can just jump in and be like, okay, what am I trying to achieve? And then what channels do I have to do it? And I think that's important. Like the why you want to get involved is something you need to think about. Like if you're a protocol and you're coming in, you're like, I just need some cash, right? Like I want to build something, I need cash. Going to be really hard without a program you're going into. So you've got to think, am I willing to help stand up some kind of process or work with someone to get a grant created in a environment where, you know, there's a lot of people that may not trust your program. If you are someone looking to build out the DAO and you're like willing to commit the time, then I think, yes, it makes total sense to jump in and like find that place where you can start committing time. So there's a lot of pathways. I think it ultimately comes down to like why you want to get involved.
So can we take a question from the audience just so you guys don't get bored of our voices? Anybody have any questions or any thoughts? Anybody want to know how to get involved in the DAO? No questions? All right. Go ahead. Oh. Go ahead, sir.
We need more women in Arbitrum and in DAOs and in crypto. And I know this is like feels like an impossible program, but how can we recruit more women, minorities, and so we just have we need diversity.
100K GAM program to SheFi to help us do product development on protocols and.
I don't know the answer to that. Oh, Corey.
Is it?
Oh, so we could start with one. I think maybe one way to start is we have somebody here who's awesome, who did a great job running all this. How do we get somebody like Corey involved? How do we get somebody like other people over there involved? I think at the end of the day, it's yes, we need to get more diversity, but we also just need to have a better onboarding process. Corey, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, it's like those two things for sure. Better onboarding. Like in all seriousness, yes, like sponsor women. SheFi is a great group. They do events. They have scholarship programs. Like there's all kinds of things going on. And then there's a lot of other groups as well. And I think like doing events together with them or partnering up with them or seeing what they need, just having them in your network and talking to them, because there's so much incredible talent in those groups that are looking to get involved in new ecosystems, and they may just not have had a point of contact with Arbitrum yet. So
Do you want to write a proposal?
I would love to, yeah.
Go ahead, Tino.
I want to say something as well that is probably going to be controversial to a degree, and I definitely agree that we should have more diversity, more women. It's discouraging to come here and see all men to some degree. I do think, though, that one of the benefits of a DAO and being on the internet is everyone's anonymous. There's actually multiple, like, I don't know who is male, who is female. I don't know what color they are. I don't know what country they live in. That is like kind of a benefit of the decentralized entity. And it's something that maybe this is my bias speaking as well, but like you're abstracted away from like that entire world of DEI a little bit in the DAO. And I think that's a benefit to say like, you don't need to come in and feel like you're a minority because we're all just avatars basically to some degree. So hopefully that's an encouraging statement and not like a minimization of the problem, but I think that is one benefit to being a decentralized
I'll tell you, if you're wondering if someone is a male and they have a PFP and they're in the Arbitrum DAO, they're probably a dude.
Yeah.
It's just that. But like,
I learned that the hard way through WinMoon. I think we probably need to fund things that aren't just financial in nature. Like a lot of crypto's pretty fucking lame, dude. Like we have a really bad branding problem. Like a lot of people just think it's like a bunch of scamming, money laundering shit. Like I don't know why I'd want to get involved in that if I like didn't already make a bunch of money here and like change my life financially. I think if you look at like NFTs are actually such a good onboarding tool, like supporting creators, like showing women artists like, hey, you can get support, like you're marginalized and we're actually gonna like back you. That's like a good way to showcase people's stories that aren't just financial, right? They're like, the DAO has tons of money. Like they should be doing things that are more focused around like culture. Like you should be throwing events that are fun, like doing stuff that is like not just a bunch of sweaty dudes trying to make like Robin Hood on chain again. And so I think like it has to start from like consumer crypto, because right now it's all like financial in nature, while like more creative stuff gives room for people to feel like they have a place to contribute. And that's probably where it starts, instead of just like, you know, that's why I spend most of my time on gaming, because it's like it's a lot more easy for people to get. Like if you look at crypto, Bitcoin took what, like 9 years from inception to be like mainstream. Ethereum took like 5 or 6. Bored Apes in like a fucking year, dude. Jimmy Fallon was like giving this shit out with like Paris Hilton and shit. So obviously there's something there with like NFTs that make people understand crypto better. Like my girlfriend's like kind of into crypto, but she's like, I like the pudgy penguins. They're pretty cute. Like, you're going to the bear chain thing. Can you get me like a shirt? Like, I don't even know what bear chain is, but they have good memes. she's never asked me about fucking GMX once, and I talk to CoinFlip every single day, right? So there's probably something there in that aspect.
So, unless you guys object to it, I do think it's an interesting exercise to like think about how you would actually pass a proposal to get more diversity in Arbitrum. Because this is one of the complexities of the DAO, right? Is that lots of people have ideas, lots of delegates have ideas, but how to actually get it done is something that we've kind of experienced in GovHack, is that it's really difficult to push it forward. So like Joe or Immutable Lawyer, if this was a proposal that someone came to you with, or an idea, better said, that someone came to you with, what would you do to get it through?
On the female part.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, a man writing a proposal to get more females in a DAO is pretty, I think, counterproductive. I don't know. But like a point I wanted to make is that it's pretty perception-based, right? So, and I'll speak on contributors in general. So the industry has used the term DAO so liberally and incorrectly and inadequately at times that external contributors that, you know, have knowledge and can contribute probably have this negative perception before entering the Arbitrum DAO that, you know, I'm just going to waste my time, I'm not going to get paid for anything, although I'll provide value. So that's the first perception from a contributor's perspective. The second perception is that, you know, maybe there are DAOs that, you know, weren't that open to women in the past. I wouldn't be aware of any, just, you know, a rebuttable assumption at this point in time. And I think in Arbitrum we have a couple of women that actually provide a lot of value. So Anna from Foundation, Rika from 404. So I think maybe doing, I don't know, some educative stuff on what they do, what their experience is, could potentially attract other women to the DAO. But I do think that females have this perception, and maybe correct at times, that it's just a bunch of sweaty dudes on a forum in their basement commenting on sometimes useless shit. So
they're not that far off.
Yeah, they're not that far off. Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
Here's an actual situation. Like I did have somebody approach me, so Maggie from SheFi, and I talked to her and asked her what would be a great way to do this, and she said, like, you know, please don't just sponsor in a way where you're not going to be like involved. We actually want like great education in here. We've gotten sponsorships where they just throw some money and they expect like, oh, there's going to be women in our ecosystem, and so we worked out a plan where perhaps, you know, they have a lot of people who are great product managers and so forth, and we have a bunch of protocols, which are a bunch of devs that have no clue how to like make their thing usable. There's 560 protocols, so that you see a few of the good ones, but there's a bunch others that didn't. It's like, well, why don't we actually do these product classes with them, partner, and do this? And it was right at the end of December when we got a review of our work, maybe like a month and a half before being done, and yeah, it was saying, oh, you're a little bit short on like buttoning certain things up. And I got scared to use $100,000 to go and sponsor their thing. And why? Because of that argument where, like I said, did you fly 10 hours? Okay, everybody agrees. Everybody agrees here that this would be a great grant to give, right? But nobody's willing to say, hey, that person has a role or authority to do it. And somebody does start making those decisions, they go find, they're like, well, that worked out good. I like the proposal that came out, but you could have hired somebody different or chosen that, right? It's like nitpicking at like $5,000 levels. And, you know, we would have that sponsorship for their program in March, but, you know, we got in a place where we couldn't make moves like that, right? So this is, again, not an example of a complaint, although I'll fucking complain all day about it if you want to sit next to me. But it's a lesson in how do we make things like that happen? Well, it's hard to put the proposal up on the forum because then other people are like, well, if it's a product thing, my company could do that. They could do that, this or that, whatever. But we had a great program lined up, ready to go. And like, even though we've been granted the authority, I'm scared to do it because I think the DAO is going to be like, oh, well, you made too many decisions yourself, even though we granted you the money, where we explicitly put in the proposal that the first 6 months we would YOLO everything to just make decisions and run experiments, and then we would add oversight. So it was a very interesting thing to happen. We need to find more ways to empower people to make moves.
At the end of the day, that's a consistent thing you'll see in the DAO. One of our issues is kind of agreement or alignment, a funds issue, like dispersing funds and having funds available to us, even though we have a $4 billion treasury. And then the third part is like a talent issue or getting the right people to go and do the work and kind of get paid through that. So we have about 10 minutes left. How do we most want to spend the time? Do we want to take questions? Does somebody want to talk about something? T-Norm, do you want to rant at the sky? Like, is there any specific points you guys want to make?
I'd take a question from the audience.
Perfect. Who has a question? Anybody have a question? Is that Ali?
Eli.
Eli?
Oh, he's been.
Oh, Patrick has a question too.
Hey, Eli here from the Arbitrum Foundation. Kudos on delegating your time the way you do, because it's really hard to be a delegate at that level. I've seen the frustrations that people face every day. So I'm curious to what degree you guys feel the foundation should and can insert itself into DAO operations to help smooth things out.
That's a really good question.
Get up on that soapbox.
I think we need more leadership, which is something that's been talked about a lot. I think the foundation and off-chain labs need to step their game up, frankly, on the communication front to give guidelines to the DAO so that when contributors come, there's a good idea of like what issues need to be met, where resources should be spent. And so that's one thing. I think another area, which we've talked about as well, Joe and his program helped fill in funding contributors at the beginning, and that program is now kind of sunsetted and looking for round 2, but in the intermediary, I think that's another way that the foundation can help. And the third, I'd say, is trying to help with the dissemination of information, like consolidation. The forum's a mess. It's honestly like hard to navigate. Because of that, I think most of the conversation has moved to Telegram, which is completely against the ethos of the space anyways. So I think those are 3 areas. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts.
I actually think the leadership portion's not just on the foundation, it's on the DAO too, and figuring out like how we even decide on leadership and what that means. And one of the unlocks from this week has been, if there's a relationship between the DAO, the foundation, OCL, like what's the cadence, how do we communicate, and how do we drive leadership together? It's definitely not on the foundation itself. I think there's a clear line that we need to think about between like what the foundation's responsibility is, and I think it's like been communicated many times that the foundation's here to support the DAO, right? So there's definitely help needed as we think about some complex kind of processes. We talked about a ventures program, right? Clearly the DAO is going to run into blockers when it comes to thinking about compliance and like how do we think about revenue share, all these crazy things. And the foundation has the expertise and the guidance and all sorts of tools that we just don't have. And I don't think it's a matter of like, do we know that now? Because I feel like we're in a very good place in terms of understanding like where we sit. It's more about now let's execute and kind of adjust as we go on, since everything's pretty young, right? Like the foundation's grown pretty dramatically from, I think I heard like 525, which is, if you think of 5x increase in headcount, like what that brings in terms of like new org discipline and efficiency. So I'm excited, honestly, after this week to see, like how we improve each other's roles and ultimately just like communicate.
I appreciate you guys having thought of it like servant leadership a lot. At the beginning, it was very tough, but it was supposed to be tough because it actually was decentralized, right? And we had to figure out how to work together. You guys had to understand what the legal requirements were, and also to understand the business case of the DAO and where you could have a strong voice. Since bringing Andrea on, you guys have made some amazing steps to make life easier for us as service providers in here, and you can have the leadership role where you make things available and put things out there. But the way some other chains have done things, where the foundation can say, here are the things that you guys should fund, and that's what you're allowed to fund. And if you do get funding, we're going to decide if we're going to use it or not. That method isn't good. Like, I'm here because you stay back and say, we're going to support this DAO to figure out in the decentralized way, because we got the other thing. There's how many millions of corporations out there? We don't need another one. Like, we're spearheading the evolution of the decentralized technology and governance, right? This is what our goal is. If we just become a corporation, it's all for nothing.
Yeah, and I mean, I sorry, go ahead, Sylvie.
Yeah, I think like a practical thing would be, I feel like the last couple days, and I was supposed to come here earlier than I did, I got busy with shit, have been so productive from like a coordination aspect, like getting to sit down with people, talk, and like there's no replacement for FaceTime, right? Like got to meet with a lot of awesome delegates. I've like been talking to Dan and Alex and T Norm and Joseph and all these guys and Joe for like months just on Telegram chats where like everyone's waking up in random times to get on these calls and try to get stuff done. But it doesn't feels like you hop on a call for like an hour, then you go back to doing your other shit because, you know, you get busy. I think putting together more of like these governance hack days on the foundation side are like so productive. Like if we could get the delegates together, protocols together, and come meet every quarter where we just sit down for like 2 or 3 days and actually get shit done. So that way it's not like 7 different Telegram posts, like 4 different calls, spread across stuff. Like the amount of work and like productivity I feel like we had today is more than in like the last year of the DAO being live. So I think the foundation doing more about reducing the friction around the coordination layer and allowing people to come together and coordinate in person would be a tremendous help.
Yeah, I think just one point from my end. I think, and this is just an assumption, obviously, from my end, I could be incorrect, but maybe increasing the DAO relations team, because I can imagine how overwhelmed I think it's Ram, Clifton at this point in time can get. Like I ran 2 proposals and I got in 30 different group chats because I counted at one point in time. So I can't imagine how many group chats these guys are in. So maybe, you know, more DAO relations people that we can reach out. For example, myself, I always annoy Clifton, unfortunately for him. So yeah, that is just, I could be incorrect nonetheless, but yeah, that's just a point from my end, I guess.
Any last questions before we wrap up here in the next 3 minutes?
Oh.
Patrick, did you have one?
Yeah, I mean, I can make a comment on that just to add to the discussion a little bit. So when everything launched, the foundation was always very, I'm always really bad at that and terrible. You know, one of the big missions of the foundation was how do we enable the DAO and provide enough breathing space to allow an ecosystem, like this, you know, plant a seed, allow the ecosystem to grow. Like to Joe's point, if we had just like come in hard to say you're going to grant X, Y, Z and anything else, you know, whoa, you know, we wouldn't want to do that. You know, if we wanted to maximize the freedom to the DAO, to enable the DAO to do cool stuff. And I think like this event here is actually a testament to that in a way. Like all we've done is help, you know, organize the venue a little bit, but you have the Hack Humanity team that jumped in. We have all the delegates here organizing the agenda. You know, we just tried to enable this as much as we can, but everyone's sort of running the show here. We're just sitting in this little corner giggling to ourselves in a way, which is really nice, isn't it? It's really cool to see. But I think what we've now learned over the past year is that the foundation needs to take on another role where we provide data points. Whereas like, here's a data point to the DAO, like this is a problem statement, this is data around a useful initiative. Then it's really up to the DAO to say, well, in the data points and the signals, do we want to take that on? Do we want to do something with that? And really provide a little bit of guidance, but not really guidance, more like, here's a direction, or here's some data, then you guys can jump on it now that there's this ecosystem that's starting to emerge, like this room, for example. So I just wanted to add some context. I don't know if anyone wants to comment.
That makes a lot of sense. And I guess to wrap this up, we'll do one last question, 30 seconds each. If there's like one thing that the DAO can do over the next 3 months or 90 days, what is that one thing that it has to do, like a proposal that has to get done or something that has to happen? Go ahead, Immutable Lawyer.
Setting strategic priorities so that, you know, even service providers that have governance teams can harmonize efforts to actually achieve those strategic priorities. Because sometimes you can submit a proposal and, you know, it wouldn't be the main focus of the Arbitrum DAO at that point in time, but you need to know what the main focus is so we can harmonize efforts on those setting proposals to achieve those priorities. So that's the main thing, I think, in my opinion.
Joe, what's the one thing?
Our cross analysis of like 17,000 DAO members showed us fueling financial sovereignty was like the #1 vision for them, and spearheading the evolution of decentralized technology and governance was the agreed upon mission from that cross section of people. So I think following and pushing that, I've seen the theme emerge here, and Patrick was talking about it. If optimism right now is about impact, I think the space we're looking for, the blue ocean, is the freedom, the ability for the builders to do what they want the way that they want it. And if I'm a betting person, our strategy might make more impact too.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in real quick. So I think strategy, like Joseph's saying, is so important because we've got a DAO that's as close to decentralized as possible. The trade-off is, it's harder to align on a North Star. And if we can make up for that trade-off, like super strong combination, right? The other item I think is branding. And this is not just for gaming. This is for all the cool tooling and the network in general. If we keep trying to compete on grants, incentives, like it's not a winning strategy, right? We have a robust tech stack and a great team and a great setup that far exceeds a lot of the other networks. And we've got to position ourselves with grants and incentives to make ourselves the winning network.
I'd like to see a little bit of reflection on everything that's been done and analysis, and a little less move, break, and just a minute of like, oh, let's see what worked and didn't work, and let's iterate rather than trying to like reinvent the wheel and run into walls.
I think we have like a $7 billion treasury. We've hardly spent any of it. I think we've done some experiments that, to T Norm's point, we should go what worked, what didn't. But we should try to allocate like a few percentage of the DAO. Like I was lucky enough to be an early ARB investor. I have an unlock coming up. It's pretty fucking big. Probably going to dump it on people. So we should spend before that happens, just to be very candid about it. So I'd like to see more of that, like agileness on that.
Yeah, so I think the number one thing we should do in the next 90 days is get Sobi a monitor with that big unlock coming, right? But additionally, honestly, there's so many good proposals that came out of here and so many good conversations. I would like to do like an omnibus type proposal with a bunch of them together and say, we know these are the right things to do. Let's go do them and let's vote them and let's push a bunch of things forward. But with that, I'll say thank you to everyone. I'll see you guys in the TG chats, and we'll leave it to the orbit chains.